Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right, I knew you guys would love this one. I could see quite a few of you on already. I knew toxic-free skincare would be a hit with this community. But welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 385 of the Health Detective Podcast. And I'm actually super excited for this conversation today. I only say actually because if it's someone's first time tuning in, they look at me, I do look nerdy, but they say, okay, this is like a young guy, toxic-free skincare. That's something he's interested in. Actually, yes, and it's because of things that I've personally dealt with, and I know that our community absolutely loves these topics. Again, I can see that just by the people that are hanging out with us already. So we will get into the conversation ASAP. One thing I wanted to let you guys know about, if it is your first time tuning in, you're probably thinking, what's up with this guy's background? Isn't this a professional podcast? He doesn't have the whole setup going. That is because we would like to see you in this place February 28th and March 1st of 2025. It is beautiful, Miami, Florida, and it really does look like this at sunset sometimes and sunrise, so you should check it out. What we are doing is sponsoring an East Coast FDN conference. So this is for anyone, but we are specifically inviting our FDN trainees, FDN graduates, or even future trainees. So you have the founder, Reed Davis. He will be there. I'll be there. Hopefully that's exciting for you. And our education director and course supervisor, Elizabeth Gaines, will be there. So she'll actually be doing the main stage keynote. She'll be giving a whole lecture on salivary hormone testing. Reed and I will have a 90-minute business workshop in a separate room. So we will be doing that at a different time. And we know that how much you guys love the business side of things. And for some of you, that's a whole new topic. So we want to be able to help you with that. You'll also have the opportunity to meet approximately 1,500 other people. I doubt you'll be able to literally meet all of them in just 2 days, but this is a great networking opportunity for you guys if you're in the health space or planning to be. And I always say this because so many people, again, in our community got in here because their hearts are in the right place, but business is completely new to them. For many of you guys, when you come to these conferences, it's your first conference that you've ever been to. So do not be scared. It's the best thing ever when you get into a group of people that all are the black sheep in their family as well. So if you've ever felt nervous about it, don't be, because you will never be accepted more than at a biohacker or functional medicine conference. So the website rather is biohackerexpo.com, and please use code HDP, like Health Detective Podcast, all capitals, biohackerexpo.com, code HDP at checkout, and that gives you 50% off all tickets. All right, now for our guest today, because I know that you guys want the skincare stuff, so thanks for bearing with me. Rachel Varga is a double board certified aesthetic nurse specialist. Since 2011, Rachel has been offering medical aesthetic rejuvenation in the specialty of oculoplastics, that's a new word for me, and is known for providing a natural and healthy looking transformation and educating through the show, the School of Radiance podcast. She has performed over 20,000 rejuvenation procedures and is also a trainer for other practitioners, hint, hint, good for you guys, on rejuvenation procedures, including medical grade skincare, laser skin rejuvenation, injectables, including neuromodulators and dermal fillers, and slowing aging in general. Rachel is also passionate about delivering the highest standard of care with a focus on what the patient's specific rejuvenation goals are and a tailored approach to suit their needs, values, and lifestyle. She also has an amazing rest of her bio here. I want to make sure I hit on one thing, which is the School of Radiance.com. We'll also shout that out at the end. But if you guys want her full bio, just check the show notes at the end. Rachel, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Evan. I have a big place in my heart for the FDN community and Reed Davis and what you all are doing as practitioners to help people feel better. And when you feel better, you're going to look better. So I'm really excited to share some insights as to how when we work on the inside, our skin, the largest organ, will directly reflect all the work that you're doing for your clients and your patients.
Awesome. So like I said, I won't share my story today per se, but one of the reasons I'm particularly passionate about this is because I started dealing with acne at 9 years old. Not severe at the time, but any acne at 9 sucks. And it was definitely the first person in my grade at my school to deal with this stuff. I mean, we had not even learned about this in our sex ed classes yet, right? In 6th grade, they start warning you and saying, hey, you're going to go through changes, and every one of them is pretty much going to suck, other than your voice getting a little deeper. That was kind of cool for me. But other than that, it was not a great set of changes. And so they hadn't even warned us yet, and it was very awkward. And then it was not until almost 20, 21 years old that I really started diving deep into this stuff. And by that time, I mean, I had very severe cystic acne, and treating it from the outside literally never worked. Or if it did work even a little bit, it came with consequences. So I'm always super impressed by someone with what I would call a Western background that has the ability to kind of read between the lines and get the best of both worlds, and then understand that really the skin, in my opinion, and I'm sure yours as well, is more or less a reflection of what's inside, as you kind of already mentioned. But we can use stuff on the outside too to just help us look better, or even increase our health. So what I'm curious about, normally I start off with what kind of health issues did the person have, but I'll change it a bit today. What in your career allowed you to kind of see outside the box and maybe move from a standard Western training to also seeing that skin as a reflection of what's going on inside? And I know to our audience, or maybe even you, maybe that doesn't seem profound now since you've been doing this since 2011, but my dermatologist was a great person. I believe that they were highly intelligent, and never once in over 10 years of going to them did they ever talk about the things that I was putting in my mouth or in my body in general. So, what helped you see the light, so to speak, and think outside the box?
Oh, great question. I don't think I've ever really been asked that before. I started in the industry in 2011, and there was just a subset of patients that I was serving in the clinic for offering their rejuvenation for pigmentation, fine lines, wrinkles, stimulating more collagen, acne, red acne scars, the whole gamut, the whole part of, the joys of aging, right? And I noticed that the subset of patients that I was serving, they were coming to me in their 60s to 90s, and they just looked great. And they barely needed anything from me. They were actually getting a better outcome from the rejuvenation that I was offering. And say, for example, typically someone might need a package of 3 to 6 laser sessions for red acne scars, and they were getting results with like 1 to 2, and so their recovery and their healing was better. So what I also started to notice, and I know you are in the world of communication as well, but they communicated better. Their nervous systems were more regulated. They were able to converse with me more effectively. They just were more grounded individuals, and they were a pleasure to be around. They had their lives in order. They were dialed in with the way that they ate, with the way that they moved their body, with their personal and professional lives. So essentially, I started to take notes out of these individuals' playbooks. And then I came up with this term to describe what I was seeing, just these really beautiful humans that just, they emitted this different energy, this different aura, this different vibe to them. And I started to use the word radiance. And I later found in an Ayurvedic text, because yes, I'm Western trained, but there's so many incredible things that we can learn from TCM, from Ayurveda, obviously through gut analysis testing, instead of guessing what we're eating and how we're living our lives to optimize things, to show up in a more beautiful, powerful, dialed in way. Is Ayurveda describes radiance as the electromagnetic projection of your body system. So the radiant body is the 10th body. And then, of course, we have our body, mind, spirit, energy is the first 4. So it's this emission from an electromagnetic perspective, actually, of how well your operating systems are functioning. And if we think about the gut, this is where we get the nutrients and absorb the nutrients from our food. So all of these things do play into the way that we show up in the world. And if I'm going to be really honest with you, it's not just about looking pretty. It's actually about being a good human. And really the why behind what I do is, I started to do all these things from the biohacking world, the health optimization side of things. And I actually noticed my skin was better. I didn't have to do as many rejuvenation treatments on myself. And I was just showing up as a more beautiful, radiant woman. And so, really, it's kind of my mission to just help others both look and feel their best. And when we are more dialed in, our nervous systems are regulated, we have lower levels of inflammation in in our bodies, we're going to be better humans. So that's kind of at the end of the day, I get you on the skin stuff because what we put on our bodies is really important, and I actually have some revolutionary stuff in some products that I can talk about with the actual ingredients. But it's important to not just look great, but feel great, and make a positive impact with your family life, with your relationships, with how you all serve your patients too, to show up as your best version. Because what this does is it creates a trickle down effect to those that you engage with. When your nervous system is regulated, when your hormones are balanced, when you are just across the board hitting the marks on making sure you're getting the right levels of different minerals and vitamins and all these cofactors that are important for our metabolism, essentially. And the electromagnetic side of things is also key for nervous system. It's getting us out grounding, having fun, right? Being good people, and you will look better in the process.
I always find that the people that come on this show and have really made huge strides in their health, regardless of how big their brand is, it's just really the people that have made strides with this and helped other people. They're unique thinkers and they kind of see these patterns. So I find it very interesting that you discussed these other things that would seem disconnected from the skin, but you were seeing that when working with these individuals. You even brought up this idea of how they spoke. And one of the things that I do sometimes in the webinars at FDN when I'm just I want to sell an idea, that's for sure. If that sells them FDN, that's great, but I'm selling them an idea first to see if they resonate with that. And of course, I can show them my before and after pictures with skin. I can show them a list of conditions that I had and then don't have anymore. But one of the things that impacts them most, and I thank God I had the courage to go on Instagram and do this at the time, is I have a video, Rachel, where I was just starting intermittent fasting. I was like so new to my journey. And now you can't shut me up, and I'm speaking all the time, and I'm very, you would call it extroverted, that's for sure. And I'm just kind of in your face. I'm a little much for a lot of people, so that's why it's good for a podcast. But at the time on Instagram, without exaggeration, I'm not kidding, I'm talking about this speed. So it's like, hey guys, I just started intermittent fasting. And again, everyone speaks at different speeds, even if they are healthy. So this is not, I'm not making fun of anyone who speaks that way, but that was clearly not me because my rate of speech must have doubled the healthier that I got. And the verbal fluency is there. I can speak as a more effective communicator now, and it's more compelling. So I also love that you brought up this idea of the kind of electromagnetic side to this. I do believe that there's an energy. I think radiance is more than just the looks. I think it's something that you can actually feel with someone. So it's just really fascinating that you noticed all of that stuff. I want to get to the products, of course, today as well, but I have to ask, you said that you started studying these people more or less and figuring out what they were doing. So in terms of like specifics, whether it was dietary habits or maybe the way that they engaged in their relationships, were there some like one or two or three key things that you noticed everyone was doing? Were they, again, eating a certain diet? I'm not saying that everyone has to eat that way, but I'm just curious if you found that in your experience, maybe they were eating a certain way, or maybe all of them were super connected with their families. Like, what are some specifics?
Faith, family, fun, freedom, fitness, finances. All of these dialed in, and especially the faith and family part. Really one of the key things that we see in the blue zones, whether you kind of believe in those things or not, but when people are connected, right? So what this whole thing about looking fantastic really does, feeling and looking fantastic, is it boosts your confidence. And confidence is a key component to building your community, cultivating your community. And that is a deep survival need, right? We're stronger together, like with the FDN community here. You all connect and collaborate and share ideas, problem solve, case studies, all of that. So everybody here is kind of part of this community that's helping one another out, which is fantastic, and just absolutely love Reed Davis's vision. Great man, high integrity, and just creating an incredible community of people who are actually making a difference. No, I'm not paid to say that, but that's just, I work with a lot of people in the health optimization space, and Reed has always stood out as truly one of those gems. One of the components about me is that I'm also a researcher. I've published multiple academic research articles in various journals in the States. I'm actually writing another one for a dermatology journal that reached out recently. I'm on the board of a journal in the States. I published for a UK journal as well. So I love to kind of take this observer perspective, right? And then go kind of down the rabbit holes of why that might be, and then come out, because not everybody has the capacity to go down the rabbit hole. People get lost in that sometimes, and then report back essentially. So I wrote a really interesting paper in about 2022. You can find it if you head on over to PubMed and just type in my name, Rachel Varga, and it's on oxidative stress status and its impacts on skin aging. So you've probably heard the word biohacking. It's the art and science of modulating our environment to support our biology. But I felt like the biohacking community itself actually kind of needed a framework of sort of what can we do to help us reduce oxidative stress, which is going to then contribute to maybe fewer cases or fewer instances of eczema, psoriasis, breakouts, skin redness, hair loss, bloating, all these things. They're basically contributed to oxidative stress. So how can we reduce oxidative stress? Well, if you think about it, it's the toxic bucket, right? How full is someone's toxic bucket in regards to toxins they're exposed to in their environment, whether that's the personal care products or air quality, water quality, lighting quality, and exposure to electromagnetic frequencies, wireless cellular radiation, testing instead of guessing what we can be eating, and of course, then clearing out different things that can accumulate in the body, like yeast, fungi, mold, heavy metals, and parasites. So the approach that I took in this paper was, how can we reduce oxidative stress? And that's kind of really what I found, was basically living with a purification approach on all levels. And what this will do is empty the toxic bucket so that when a life event happens, life is full of valleys, highs and lows and in-betweens and things like that, like emotional and mental stress, can your body handle that being added to that toxic bucket? Well, if you're inflamed and something happens in your life, it's going to tip over and then you're going to get those skin issues. And one of the things that was really paramount that I found, well, not paramount, that's the wrong word. I'd say, I don't want to trigger anybody here, but actually quite alarming, was federal statistics out of Canada. So when I wrote that 2022 paper, I took a look at, okay, what are people dying from in the country? And I noticed a statistic that as a researcher, I look at like a signal, and deaths of unknown cause had doubled in 2019 compared to the previous 6 years before that. So I reached out to the publishing body and I said, can you provide clarification on really what does death of unknown cause mean? And they came back to me and said, the category of autoimmune disease or someone passing away before having a diagnosis. That's what that death of unknown cause was kind of termed as. And it doubled in 2019 compared to previous years. And then I wrote a paper on nutrition and the skin for a UK journal this year and looked at the data again for 2022, and it doubled again from that metric in 2019. So what we're seeing is autoimmune things on the rise, which I attribute to toxins in our environment and also the way that we're living, like living more of this high-paced, wearing the busy badge of honor kind of situation, and stress, cortisol, all of those things, which just cortisol, if it kind of gets away on you, you mentioned the cadence of speech. And if you're listening to this, you're noticing that I'm actually speaking a little bit more quiet or slower, if you will. And I actually do this intentionally to communicate clearly, but also for my own benefit. So I'm not like fire hosing all this information to you, because that would stress me out, probably stress you out too. And for those of you listening as coaches, as health coaches, as FDN practitioners, consider this so that when you're doing your client work, you yourself are not so much in that high beta, high cortisol state, but you're more relaxed. This will actually be more conducive to keeping your body in this more sort of like peaceful, but very dialed in, very intentional state. So I'm really glad that you actually mentioned words per minute. I used to, think that, oh, I have all this information in my mind. I need to communicate as fast as possible to help this person, but that might actually not always land when you're doing your care with your patients, because they might not actually receive it. It's kind of like drip in one thing at a time so that people don't get the overwhelm. But basically, in that paper, I created a framework. Instead of going straight to red light therapy, we want to look at purification in our homes first: air, water, lighting, electromagnetics, food quality, testing instead of guessing, and then maybe looking at doing some detoxing with yeast, fungi, mold, heavy metals, and parasites.
Oops, sorry, I was stuck on mute. So, okay, I know this is about skin, obviously, but you totally teased me with the studies. So, if you had only mentioned that in 2022 we saw a doubling, well, I guess that at that point would be a quadrupling almost, of these unknown deaths or unknown causes, I think everyone's conspiracy hat would go on. Which, listen, I love humoring to some degree too, but I like staying grounded in real information. I think that's helpful. And honestly, if you study the real information, it's strange enough. So you could have a field day with that. But when you go to 2019, that's surprising even to someone like me, because that precedes obviously a lot of the stuff that we were probably all thinking when I just mentioned 2022. So I'm kind of curious, and I want to separate something for you so that you can feel free to say this. When I'm asking a question like this, guys, there's people that are going to come on and humor an idea. That doesn't mean that they're 100% saying that this is solidified and proof that it exists, but I think humoring ideas is a good idea. I didn't mean that in a funny way, but I really do think it's a good idea. So you have to have thought this through. What do you really just believe all of a sudden in 2019 it doubled because the toxic load became so much higher from 2018 to 2019? Or is there something that happened in 2019 that I'm not thinking of that might be contributing to this stuff?
Do you use a cell phone?
Yes.
Yeah, we had a different frequency get rolled out. So we've
Okay.
gone through an evolution of 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, what's next. So essentially, we're living these days, not to be a Debbie Downer here, I like to be the positive Patty. As a researcher, I also have to, evaluate what's happening in the world at that time. And so I've been looking at a number of different researchers that have been publishing studies, and the wireless cellular radiation side of things is pretty key. I started a deep dive into this stuff in about 2017 because I noticed that I live on Vancouver Island, Pacific Northwest. When I would spend 1 or 2 days a week actually in nature, say on the Wandafuka Trail, I just live in like this beautiful place here, I would feel better. And where was I? Where was I going? Where was my body like, oh, I really want to go to this place because then I feel better that week and my skin looks better. I was going to dead zones in nature and, 4x4ing and off-roading and things like that, adventuring, having fun, being in nature. But I was basically getting almost like a break from heavy metals in the air, from nervous system stimulation, from cars and different sounds. And I was getting more natural light. I wasn't around artificial lighting, but my cell phone wouldn't work because I was also in a dead zone. So I started to think to myself, what? Could I be kind of one of those individuals that's a little bit more sensitive to these things? And a lot of you who are helping people out, let's just, say it what it is. You're highly empathic people, that you've had some type of experience yourself and you want other people to experience the same transformation you have because you've done the work, you know how good you can feel, and you desire to help others achieve this too, this transformation essentially. And so I started to do a little bit more research around this. Like, what does wireless cellular radiation do to the body? Well, if we look at live blood cell analyses underneath the microscope compared to baseline or 5 minutes on your cell phone, your red blood cells undergo something called morphology. Instead of these very smooth, round edges of the red blood cell, what happens after just 5 minutes on your phone is they start to get these jagged edges and then they start to stick together. So instead of being like inner tubes bumping off one another from these electromagnetic interactions, which that's why getting outside grounding, using PEMF mats, I think is so great. Not actually having technology touching your body is so important. Basically, when these red blood cells start to stick together, we get these chains called rouleaux. They're almost like rolls of a coin. And then we get clotting factors. So then I started to also think, why are these people just saying, they're so tired, this fatigue, this, onslaught of why so many people are having fatigue? Could this be connected? And so it comes down to blood flow, actually. And we can actually measure blood flow to the skin using speckle contrast photography. And when people are on their phones, what happens is the red blood cells stick together. We're not getting blood flow as effectively to the skin, to the brain, to all of our organs. So we're not getting this delivery of oxygen. We're not getting this delivery of nutrients. And we're also not getting this reduction of metabolic waste products to then get filtered through the liver and kidneys and things like that. So that's why I'm always like, I have to put this skin angle, because this is my shtick, if you will, what I'm known for. But your skin is the largest organ of your body. If we can see that, hey, something's impacting blood flow and an organ from working optimally, it's going to be other organs too, because it's the largest organ. So I thought that was really interesting. It's like, what's happening in 2019? Well, we had this new type of frequency rolled out, essentially. We can't get away from it, but there are some cool things that we can do. And yeah, I started to do all these things, started to add biohacking into the mix. And I just noticed that I could be outside in the sun longer. I wasn't burning after 10 minutes. I also bumped up my usage around that same time of things like NAC and antioxidants to help my body empty this toxic bucket, because that's what antioxidants do essentially, is they help to kind of like pull out these toxins and help your body deal with free radicals. So that's kind of one of the interesting things I noticed was my response to a stressor, which was sun, right? Sunshine. I mean, sun is great for you, but do use your skincare on the high real estate areas that get a lot of exposure. And I just started to look better, feel better. My body composition was improving. But then here's where my story kind of takes a turn. Is I was rear-ended really badly in 2019. And so I really leaned into my self-care, eating the right foods, reducing oxidative stress so that my body wouldn't hurt, so that I wouldn't have headaches, so that I wasn't this grumpy pants to be around. I had to really ramp up how well I cared for myself so that I could recover. And then I started to notice my skin was better. My body composition was improving. I was more of a pleasure to be around. So it's like, people always ask, what's the one thing I can do for my skin for acne, eczema, psoriasis, pigmentation, fine lines, wrinkles, sagging to the jawline, losing hair, losing energy. It's funny that if we take this approach with caring for our body, mind, spirit in general, everything else is going to be impacted. Everything is connected.
Well, you're an amazing guest for a variety of reasons, but definitely because I admit I cheated a little bit. I was waiting to see if you'd bring it up first for the 2019 thing. That's exactly where my mind went. I was not aware of that increase in fatalities, but I was aware because people, and listen, I'm saying this on behalf of Evan, not on behalf of FDN at this point. So this is a separate podcast and conversation, but do I think there's sketchiness around COVID? Of course, yes. I think actually most people do, just for different reasons, and they have different beliefs around it. But what I always worried about, and people seem to forget this, is that simultaneously there was a ton of 5G rollout even during the beginning of the pandemic. And I thought that was fascinating because I was just thinking, I'm like, well, if this does do something, it is going to be so hard to prove or to track that it was this or a global pandemic and all this other stuff going on. I mean, I can prove that this was going on at the time. I had a video that I made in protest of our town, and it was very sound. I tried to be objective about it. I wasn't going tinfoil hat. I just said that there's not enough studies and that we really should probably test this before we start just rolling it out in our town. And it got a ton of views at the time. It literally spread around in our local area. When I say a ton, I mean, less than 10,000, but more than my 50 that I would have normally gotten at the time. So people really responded to it. But I think that's something that has happened over the last few years that needs to be accounted for. And I think sometimes I'm not saying this was perfect either, but I think sometimes people, when they see these mystery deaths, if you will, now, because we are seeing it, immediately what they ask is, was this person, whatted for COVID? And maybe it was that. I'm not saying it couldn't be. I don't know. I haven't been in that research. I don't know if there is proper research for it. But there's a variety of things that have happened since 2019. And I think all of them are worth looking at. 5G, COVID, and the quote unquote solution to COVID itself. I actually think all of those have implications in these mystery deaths. And I think we just need to do what we can to be as healthy as possible. And if you're fortunate enough to be in the FDN space or something similar where you have digital flexibility, if you don't live somewhere like Rachel lives, just even taking a month to go get an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, I think that's probably going to do more good for you in the long run than we can ever imagine right now. So thank you for humoring that with me, Rachel. We don't have to necessarily go any deeper with that. We can continue with just the skin, but I appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm actually going to go into some of that research myself. I did not know, again, about the increase in these, I'll call them mystery deaths. That's a little
Well, it's
telling.
autoimmune stuff,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, FDN's been busy because all these people are like, oh, I don't feel good. I have low energy. I'm putting weight on, having skin stuff. My hormones are out of whack. But it's just so interesting that the more simple we live, but also more dialed in and utilizing technology and taking this purification approach in every layer will have a big impact in the way that you show up. And I love that you mentioned the conspiracy theory side of things, because especially when I wrote this paper on nutrition and the skin, I started to learn about what was being done to agriculture to yield better crops and more livestock, essentially. So a lot of these foods that in the past, like say in previous generations, were great, are now higher in these inflammatory types of agents, right? Like lectins and things like that. So that kind of made me feel a little bit like a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, oh, they're doing all this stuff to the soil, to agriculture, to livestock. So that's why, we might have heard or seen these different articles like eat raspberries or eat dark chocolate. And now it's like, well, there's some reasons why we may want to avoid some of those things. It's simply they just didn't have the same antioxidant capacity, and you're actually consuming these other things in the process. But the other thing that I want to mention, so food quality is a big one. I eat a very high protein diet, actually. I eat about 1 gram of protein per body weight. Uh, per pound of body weight, and that's just made such a difference. So just going to I've always eaten really well, but I used to eat like salads for every dinner, and then I wasn't satiated. Then I'd have a bowl of cereal, but I actually just wasn't getting enough nutrients. But the other thing here that you mentioned that was really key was the taking time off, because something called recovery is necessary. So I lift weights 5-6 days a week. Happy to be able to do that finally after car crash recovery. But when you are working your body, you're putting muscle on. Having muscle is one of the key indicators of longevity. And I like to say lift or be lifted, especially for the ladies. You really want to get your muscle mass up. Curves from muscles are very attractive. And it's important that our physicality is strong and we're getting that energy expended during the day so that we sleep better. But we also need to consider this busy badge of honor with all that we do, all of us, with serving those who desire to have our help. Is we also need to make sure that we are recovering. And what I find when I take that time to myself to have fun, to hang out with friends and family, to do things like go to church, they kind of like fill these different cups of mine, and I get little hits of inspiration to then create content. So don't look at taking time off as, you feel guilty doing it. You have to enjoy life. We can help people out all day long, but at the same token, we also need to do things that are fun for ourselves too, and that are constructive for our own personal and professional development.
Thank you. So let's move on to the product side. And I want to ask what I hope is a fair question with this. So far, we've made the case for pretty much everything except external things that we're putting on our skin in terms of, you talked about faith, you talked about family, you talked about the food that we're eating, and we know all of these things can impact skin. So where do products fall into the mix? Because it seems like you would promote to any, I could be wrong, but it seems like you would promote to almost anyone. The first things to do are address what's going in our body, and then certainly our mental health and all those things. So at what point do products have a place in all of this? How should they be used? What are the benefits? I would just love to know your perspective on this, because we've had like one or two other people on where, they're talking about skin, and they're hitting on very similar points. They all bring their unique pieces of information, but they're hitting on conceptually similar points where they're talking about, hey, it's all about what's inside. And then we end up talking about some type of product. So I'm kind of curious where that fits into this puzzle and why you think these things are useful, or know these things are useful, I should say.
Well, think about the consumables in your home. That's going to be your food and your personal care products and cleaning products, right? It's not just about eating great food. It's also, what are you washing your dishes with? What are you cleaning your home with? What are you doing your laundry with? What are you using to clean your body and clean your hair and beautify yourself? So it's actually taking a really good hard look at everything that you're using and avoiding these hormone disruptors. The biggest ones are parabens. And just, what are you actually putting in your body every day, but also what are you putting on your body every day? Because we all need to wash our face and wash our hair and wash our skin. Otherwise, we'll get breakouts and skin irritation and things like that. By the way, those who have sensitive skin, somebody I think online started to tell people, just splash your face with water, don't use a cleanser, and definitely don't exfoliate. That, I think, is the worst advice ever for people who are dealing with sensitive skin. Because when you simply start to care for your skin in the way that it desires to be cared for, in usually about 2 weeks, you should start to notice some of that redness go down, and also more glassy looking skin and more hydrated feeling skin. So it can actually happen pretty quick. But what we utilize for cleansing and moisturizing and exfoliation and sun protection is really important. And we want to also be aware of, number one, the companies we're supporting, which is why I love the FDN community, because I know Reed Davis personally. He's just a stand-up guy. But also, is that product free of the things that we want to avoid? And are there things in the product that are actually going to be feeding and nourishing the skin? So it's not just putting a moisturizer on for hydration. It's actually looking at your skincare and your hair care in a way that, is what I'm putting on my skin something that's actually going to feed and nourish it for more kind of long-term benefit? So there's a couple of key things to do for the skin, in my opinion, to just look after it in the way that it wants to be looked after. And that's cleanse the skin in the AM and the PM, ideally in the bath or the shower, so that you're rinsing all of that product off, with a double cleanse in the PM if you wear makeup. Because cleansing actually removes things like heavy metals and other pollutants in the air that land on the skin, or even mold in the home. And when we have different things in the air landing on the skin, it can actually tell the keratinocyte stem cells in the skin to die faster, cellular apoptosis. And we don't want that. So that's actually why washing your body, it's like cleaning off the energy of the day as well. There's something to be said for that too. It's actually really important for caring for the skin, is actually properly cleansing. Then we want to do a moisturizer to feed and nourish the skin in the AM and the PM. And then we want to use, I'm a huge fan of mineral sunscreen, not the chemical sunscreen filters that sting your eyes. They smell like sunscreen, but I really like zinc sunscreens, and on the high real estate area. So you and I might have a similar skin type. So some of us that don't have a lot of melanin, we can experience like precancerous lesions or even skin cancers. And 10% of skin cancers occur in the eye area. And these can then translate into other things. I've seen a skin cancer on the lash line shift into lymphoma. So very real. But high real estate areas, you still want to get that sun exposure on your skin, on your body, because 10 to 15 minutes a day, I think, is just great. It feels good. and then exfoliating a couple times a week. So getting off those dead cornflakes, which is the stratum corneum, which is the top layer of the skin that things can get trapped in, like debris in the air. We want to be exfoliating that off. And it's so funny for me to consider when people say, I don't wash my face in the AM and stuff like that. It's like, oh my gosh, if I did that, my skin would just feel like itchy and dry and terrible. It's like if I don't wash my face like first thing and I wait a couple hours, it's just like my skin just feels awful. It's kind of one of those things like you just don't know how good you can feel until you experience it. Like, say, for example, doing a parasite cleanse. So skincare doesn't have to be complicated, but it does need to kind of hit on those 4 key components: cleanse, moisturize, sunscreen, and exfoliate. But then you can do extra things like bump up your usage of hyaluronic acid, potent antioxidants, things like retinol and peels and dermal rolling, maybe getting into some laser skin rejuvenation stuff too. But the home care is so important. And I actually, if you're dealing with a client who has like melasma or pigmentation that they want to get rid of, or red acne marks, having them dialed in first with just a basic routine for a couple of weeks, do the internal stuff too, they should start to see some shifts. And kind of whatever is left over with doing the heavy lifting at home, then there's some in-clinic stuff to help out with that as well.
I don't want to make you cringe here, and I am actually a very open-minded person, so this is something that I might just try just for the sake of trying to see what happens. So, of course, I shouldn't say of course, for those that don't know, when you deal with like acne or other severe skin stuff, there are some very interesting forums on the internet, and you will get recommended things that are just absolutely nuts. I mean, stuff with, well, I don't even want to say this because it'll imply that I have done it. I swear on my life I have not done this, but I mean like things with mixing urine with other formulations. I mean, this is actually serious. People really promote this, and people actually swear by this stuff. I don't obviously believe that that's something we have to do, but you can get into some very weird things on these forums because people are desperate and they're just trying to do whatever they can. But I have not cleansed from 29. I probably haven't cleansed in 9.5 years, 10
How
years.
old how old are you, Evan?
I'm 29 now.
Just wait.
So, well,
Just
I'm
wait.
open to trying it. I'm open to trying it. And
Yeah.
let's also make a fair comparison here for myself. So, I don't want to be the equivalent of someone who says, "Oh, well, I went vegan, I went paleo, I went keto, and now I feel amazing." Well, what were you eating before? Well, I was eating McDonald's every day. Well, I can guarantee any or all of those diets will work for some period of time if you're going from eating McDonald's every day. So I was using some natural cleansers actually beforehand, but that was probably only a few month period. So prior to that few month period, though, it was the things like, well, I don't want to get sued. The name brand cleansers that just destroy your skin. I mean, it's dry afterwards, it's red, it stings. I had been using that stuff since 9 years old, so from 9 till 19. But over the last 9 to 10 years, every single day, what it's been is washing pretty thoroughly in the shower with just the water. And I do use a moisturizer. I've always used a moisturizer, and I think that's very important for me. If I didn't do that, I don't know that my skin would look okay. I actually don't think it would at all. And part of that's probably just because I like hot showers, and that does unfortunately dry out the skin. So, I got to do my whole cold shower at the end thing. But I'm definitely open to trying this again because I don't want to become dogmatic. And again, I don't want to be the equivalent of the person that, tries any random diet that it's like, well, of course this was better than the standard American diet. And then I maintain for all these years that that's the ideal thing to do. So I'll give it a shot. The other thing is too, if I was in person with someone, I mean, I look okay. I wouldn't say, I mean, you look glowing to me, right? I wouldn't say that I have that. So that could be something that I'm missing out on by not doing those things. My biggest goal ever was just, I don't want to wake up and deal with another breakout every single day of my life. So once that's achieved, it was almost like, oh, I've already hit the pinnacle of this. This is as good as I can get. So I'm curious, in terms of cleansers, in terms of moisturizers, what specific things do you recommend? Do you offer them directly? Let us know about that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the way that we eat. It's very bio-individualistic. That's why I'm not ever going to say, this one product, this one cleanser, this one moisturizer, this one sunscreen, this one scrub, this one eye cream is going to be great for everybody because everybody has different needs. The other thing, Evan, I would just lovingly like to share with you is that because I come from oculoplastics and ophthalmology, so we have our general dermatology, cosmetic dermatology, plastic surgery, cosmetic plastic surgery, and oculoplastics pretty much right at the top. And the number one thing that men come to see me for in their 30s, 40s, and 50s is hooded upper eyelids, lower eye bags, and dark circles. I mean, the same thing for the ladies as well, especially around perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And you'll all see this in your clients as well. Your younger patients who are late 30s to mid 40s, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just aged overnight. Like I'm losing collagen and elastin. By the way, in my research paper, 10 to 12 grams of consuming collagen a day is really kind of what it takes to notice visible skin changes. But everybody's different. It's never going to be one thing for everybody. That is why I like to take a customized approach. And I know you all do too here in the FDN community through testing acidic gassing. But sometimes we need to use a lighter moisturizer. Sometimes we need to use a heavier moisturizer. Sometimes we want to add different antioxidant serums to boost hydration, but maybe not one with vitamin E because that could make someone who's prone to breaking out a little bit too oily. And also cleanser. Do we want a cleanser for more oily skin, or do we want a cleanser for more dry, mature skin? Do we want it to remove the makeup? So there's lots of different like variables and nuances, which is actually why I do enjoy taking a one-on-one approach with my clients, and then, teach everybody how to use their products in sort of like my group coaching situation, that I'm not putting that stuff on YouTube. Get ready with me. This is how you apply your products kind of thing. But in our society, we're looking for a magic bullet. This is like the culture. You go on a website, you order what you want, it's there the next day. It's never going to be one thing. And especially with our health and the way that we live, it really is actually about being consistent and hitting the foundations. So reducing oxidative stress, making sure that we're hitting enough protein, making sure that we're getting enough fats, making sure that we're hydrated enough, that our nutrients, we're making sure that we're getting enough minerals and nutrients. And the other component is, it's kind of like the earlier you start with this, the better. So I started in the rejuvenation industry in my early 20s, and now I'm in my late 30s. And I actually feel like I look better now than I did then from all these years of being really consistent. So oftentimes people will connect with me and be like, oh, I did this for so long. It worked well for me. But it's kind of like getting ahead of things. And that's why for all of us here, we're really interested in our health and wellness in general. And it's you're kind of making deposits essentially into how you're going to be when you're older. I made that reference with muscles earlier. Lift or be lifted when you're older. So it's kind of like taking care of things before they need to be taken care of. Prevention is a big thing in the skin and anti-aging rejuvenation space too. You'll hear a lot of like people doing things preventatively. There's something to be said for that. But it's really the home care is super key to be dialed in with, instead of just like showing up to a practitioner, hey, I have some red acne scars, let's take care of it. Well, they're probably just going to kind of keep coming back unless you are really caring for the foundations first, and then in between those sessions as well. So lovingly mentioning to you, Evan, that this is typically the first area of the face that we see signs of aging, which is the eyes. So sleep on your back instead of your stomach or your side. That's a great free tip too. Maybe add some sunscreen as well to protect the delicate skin around the eyes too. So now you know.
Well, I appreciate your objectivity and lack of bias in the answer to the question, but I mean, just for the sake of kind of putting people in the right direction here, I mean, you didn't mention any products. You said it is bio-individual. If you had to start somewhere with someone, is there a quiz, a test, something that they can do to start even figuring out what that bio-individualized skincare approach might even look like?
Yeah, there's a couple other things that come into play. It's like the price point, the ingredients, how things feel. Like a lot of men don't want like a thick moisturizer too. So it's a little tricky to put that in a quiz, which is why I don't have an easy quiz like that. And I'd actually be a little apprehensive to be like, oh, I'm going to get this skin routine. And I took this quiz that probably only has 4 answers for like a dry kit. oily kid, acne prone, pigmentation. It's going to be cookie cutter. Trust me, I've looked into what these quizzes are like and if I should do it or not. So basically what I've done over the years is create a skin shop, and I sell about 200 different products on there: skincare, hair care, makeup, dermal rolling tools, other lots of great things, kind of like one-stop shop. And then I was selling all these other companies' products over the years because they were great products that I've worked with since 2011. But I knew that I could do it better. And so this is an exciting time in my world too, because I finally created my line. And I did it out of a need for those of us who just really want to limit toxic exposure at every front and utilize things that are made with attention to detail. Like, say, for example, 6-time filtered deionized water. Like, what skincare company actually does that? Preserve with colloidal silver, so no other preservatives are needed. Utilizing carbon C60 as an antioxidant, which also makes a rock star serum, which I have on my skin too. And it's a bit of a mix. So I do like to take the one-on-one approach. I know my coaches are like, oh, you should charge like an astronomical amount for one-on-one, which probably from a business perspective you should. But I do like to give the individual recommendations. But in general, cleanser, moisturizer, sunscreen, scrub. And I do have some great options on my skin shop and some ways to help you all out too, cost-wise, with code FDN15.
Oh, nice. I'm glad we got that set up. Thank you. All right. Do you have a few more minutes? Because we are at 50 minutes, but I'm good if you're good.
I'm all yours.
Perfect. So I also want to talk about the School of Radiance, obviously. So I didn't fully understand if that's something that someone like an FDN practitioner could go through or if they would need an additional background. So please, let's talk about what that is and who would be best to go through something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's basically 3 different ways that I can serve. Free stuff, the School of Radiance podcast, Reed Davis has been on there. Looking forward to having you on there for some speech stuff too. But that's kind of like positive little like insights to keep you on track. And then there's the one-on-one session with me, which is like the custom cake recipe. But it's not just optimizing the skincare routine. It's not just, providing clarification on which rejuvenation options could be helpful, but it's also getting into the lifestyle side of things, getting into conversation about how someone is actually living that's contributing to nervous system dysregulation and just like a lack of general peace. So custom cake recipe, that's the one-on-one ongoing support with me there too. And then we want to ice the cake, right? So learning how to put the products on, that's my seasonal tutorials with my winter one happening right now. And I recommend everybody do that. So there's 7 weeks of live lessons where I actually take you into my restroom and show you exactly how to use everything. Especially for guys, you never actually learn how to apply your products properly. I've seen so many men over the years like put product in their palm and then kind of like dab it. That's inefficient. There's way more sophisticated ways to get lymphatic drainage at the same time. And I also teach things like dermal rolling in my tutorials. So that's like the icing on the cake, the how, what, why, how to actually use your stuff. And then the cherry on top is the membership. So that's where I basically help primarily women, but also women who are in partnerships in a marriage. About 50% of the women in there are in relationships or single. But how can we actually show up with the way that we present ourselves, with the way that we carry ourselves, that are actually going to be conducive to balancing our hormones? Lots of things that I do behind the scenes that I actually don't share publicly that have made a massive difference based on what I've observed of just beautiful, high vibrating individuals. What are they doing? How are they moving? How are they speaking? How are they engaging with themselves and others? How are they staying as pure as possible? Body, mind, spirit, energy. So the membership is a really special place. So basically, when you come across someone like me, I have to be very clear what my storefront is. It's skin. It's how do we get great skin? What are the best products? What's the best rejuvenation? Really, though, what's going to make a huge difference is the way that we live every single moment of the day, so that we show up for ourselves, we build our communities, and then we also just are better partners. We are just more highly functioning individuals here to make an impact in the world. So it's kind of like, sort of like the intelligence behind beauty, if you will. And that's really the membership. And a lot of individuals in there are actually speakers, they're CEOs, they're just really wanting to be able to put themselves out there from a dating perspective, build their level of attraction, and just make their impact with what they're here to do so that they have the energy to do it.
Awesome. And Zoe, we'll get to your question next, but just for the sake of fluidity here, where can people find that? And then Tracy, we can leave that on the screen while we're doing Zoe's question as well.
Yeah, everything's over at theschoolofradiance.com. And I share some fun stuff on social media at Rachel Varga Official on Instagram. And then the podcast, the School of Radiance podcast. But everything is in one easy place, from skincare to booking a one-on-one, joining my seasonal tutorials that are always live, and then the membership. Those are the main sort of like vehicles that I serve and kind of build on this knowledge of how do we become our most beautiful, attractive, and happiest, most peaceful versions.
Tracy, I just realized that was very stupid of me, so I promise I'll put Rachel's stuff back on, but I need to share Zoe's question. So Zoe had this question of, I always thought you should avoid putting products on the eyelid or too close to the eyes. Are you advising application of zinc sunscreen on the eyelids?
Great question. I actually saw this one come through, and thanks for your compliment earlier, Zoe. I really appreciate your kind words. So the eyes are the first area of the face to show signs of aging. Also, about 50% of North American population is dealing with dry eye. So actually, feeding and nourishing and cleansing the skin to the eyelids is really important so that we're keeping these meibomian glands kind of like free from getting clogged and debris and stuff like that. The eyes tell us a lot about our internal health, by the way. So redness, puffiness, darkness, those can be really overt signs that the body is inflamed. I'm a huge fan of cleansing the eyelids in the AM and PM, just keeping that lash line clean. And so that's why I don't love lash extensions as well, because of the component of harboring bacteria and stuff. And you're not really going to be washing your lashes effectively. And then actually putting eye cream and moisturizers on your eyelids. I have pretty long lashes. And so it's this other component of when we're feeding the skin, we're also feeding the stuff on the skin too, like our hair follicles. So it's kind of interesting when we care for the skin around the eyes to help with things like fine lines, wrinkles. Maybe I know for me, there's a component of my lashes being longer and thicker because I'm actually feeding the skin around the hair follicles. And the other thing with sunscreen is, I mentioned this earlier, 10% of all skin cancers are actually in this belt here, which is pretty significant. So we're getting the sun's rays kind of coming at us like this typically. So brow, temple, eyelid, top of the cheek here, even the nose. I mean, Hugh Jackman had a skin cancer removed too. He's pretty open about that. But the ones that are better around the eyes is going to be the mineral sunscreens compared to the chemical sunscreen filters, which like avobenzone, oxybenzone. So if you have a sunscreen, look at the back of the bottle and look at the medicinal ingredient section, and you're going to see probably like zinc or titanium. But if you see anything that ends with an 8 or an own, those are chemical sunscreen filters that are going to irritate the eyes. So to answer your question, that's probably why you kind of have avoided putting sunscreen around the delicate area of the eyes, because those chemical sunscreen filters typically do irritate the eyes. But I love a good old 20% zinc sunscreen too around the eyes.
Great question, great answer. I have one final one for you. I did this a little bit out of order because normally the final thing I ask is where people can find you, but humor me on this. This is not to challenge anything. It's genuinely curiosity about your belief around this. So you talked about this idea, long-term, cleansing, exfoliating, moisturizing, all that kind of stuff. I do know that there's some evidence that, tribes, whether Native American or even, people in the Middle East thousands of years ago, did actually do different things on their skin. So what I'm curious about is the philosophy I had taken with the lack of products that I use, for example, and then I use the moisturizer, is Okay, well, my ancestors might, not saying it's correct, but might not have used anything. The moisturizer, though, is compensating for the fact that my ancestors also did not have the privilege of taking a 20, 30-minute hot shower, and that clearly dries my skin out. So this is compensating for that. So what I'm curious about is I would assume that you clearly do not believe someone in their late 30s would, and it's a compliment, would look as good as you do right now if we're going back 2,000 years. They might have had their own attraction in their own, or attractiveness in their own way, but I don't think we'd ever make the argument that they would look identical to you. So when you talk about these products being used long term, what is the perspective if we think from an ancestral perspective? Is it just that no, our ancestors, yes, they lived long healthy lives, but they did not look as good as we can, so we might as well use this stuff? Or I guess just what's the logic behind it? Because I've always taken I'm not necessarily trying to be the best looking person in the world. It would be awesome, but I accepted long ago I don't think that's going to happen. So losing the acne was good enough for me. But are you with these skin products just trying to achieve something that otherwise could not have been achieved by our ancestors? Or am I missing something? I feel like I'm just kind of trying to say the same thing a million different ways. Am I being confusing, or does that make sense what I'm getting at?
I love that you brought this up. This is a concept that no one has ever asked me. If we think to, say, for example, Cleopatra or Nefertiti, back in Egyptian times, this is a long, long time ago. Beautification is not new. And you mentioned, other cultures and doing different things for their skin. Beautification is not new. However, we do not have photography, but what we do have with Nefertiti is the sculpture of her. And what we notice with her face is she had a very tight jawline. The other thing, if we kind of go back a little bit, is in like the early 1900s, aristocratic women figured out that, hey, if they don't eat super chewy foods, they don't develop jowls because the jowl is a muscle, right? So when we talk and chew a lot, we chew gum, or we use those like chompy things to develop the masseters, which for men is great because as we age, a man's jawline becomes more feminized. And a woman's jawline, as they age, become more masculinized with hypertrophy, especially if any of your clients are super stressed out. You'll notice that their masseters pop out quite a bit. They don't have this like really smooth kind of angle here. So just a tip for some of your clients that might be in like adrenal fatigue or high cortisol. But the muscle here, when it gets worked, it actually can masculinize a woman's face. We call this the jowls, and there's things that we can do about that. So I would go so far as to say that our ancestors probably looked better than us, and they were able to do less to their skin. Like, sure, they're going to be outside, they're going to be, working the land a little bit more sun exposure. But I feel like the way that they lived and the access to nutrient dense foods resulted in our ancestors having less oxidative stress. Their toxic bucket was simply emptier. So I would be so far as to say that our ancestors, they looked and felt better. But then there's also this is such an interesting thing to converse about. But then we also see that, they didn't live as long, right? But maybe they didn't have these chronic diseases, like something else got to them, like a famine or some type of pathogen, or just life was hard on them and their body gave out for whatever reason, or battles, or all these different things. So we're simply, I think, dealing with a time where exposure to environmental toxins continue to increase, seen and unseen. We talked about wireless cellular radiation. Our foods are not as nutrient dense as they once were, and there's things in the food that didn't used to be there. So I would go so far as to say that maybe we looked better in the past, and also from just like a general attractiveness perspective, leaner, right? Without the utilization of toxic rancid seed oils. And don't be fooled, canola oil is in a lot of personal care and beauty products. You'd be surprised what I see when I analyze different products to potentially have on my skin shop. So yeah, I think to answer your question in a nutshell, Evan, I bet you we were a little bit more attractive. Men had more muscle, right? Higher testosterone. Women probably were walking a lot more. Their hormones were more balanced. They would have had that waist to hip ratio that might actually have been a little bit more ideal. Hair was probably more full also. So just lots of things that are different. That's such a cool question to ask. I want to just make sure, did I miss anything? Is there any area to that question you want me to go a little deeper on?
No, I'm glad that you were picking up what I was putting down because I almost looked at it. I was trying to see what you were suggesting, and I was making sure that I had the right idea about the use of these products. So the FDN equivalent almost would be, we know food has nutrients, duh. But one of the things that most FDNs recommend is long term use of some type of multivitamin that might be fitting for the person. Now, a client
Bingo.
would say, well, why on earth, if I'm eating all this good food, do I need the multivitamin? It's like, well, because we no longer, at least the vast majority of us, no longer have access to the food that would have provided that. So we're not necessarily suggesting the multivitamin was the pinnacle of health, but it is a very appropriate and arguably necessary modification to get similar results for people in today's world. So it almost seems like these products, they're harmless, right? They're not going to do anything bad. They would be a way of just adjusting a little bit to the modern times. And I think that's very appropriate. And I think that needs to be talked about more. Some people get into the functional medicine space, actually, including myself when I first got in, almost as what I would word as or label as purists. And no, the best of both worlds is to utilize these modern advances and technologies that we have. And I don't mean technology as in even a red light panel, although that's very cool and I love those too. A technology is just any advancement in anything. A multivitamin, that delivery in a sense is a technology. So you want to use those, stay as pure as possible, but we do need to adapt to an ever-changing world with artificial light, EMFs, all that stuff. Unless you're going and living on one of the islands that 4 out of the 5 blue zones are on, you're probably going to have to adapt. So I think I totally understand that now, and I love that you had an answer for it, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, let's state the obvious. We're living in different times. We're on video right now. Like you can see me. We never had this before. You might be in like the Coliseum and there's something going on, or like a theater or whatever. But the fact that we're so forward facing now, right? Like when everybody started to go on Zoom, people were super conscious of their double chin. I started doing Zoom calls in like 2017. Before any of this stuff, people didn't get what I was doing because clients were coming to fly and see me from all over the world. I had to find a way to stay connected. And so pretty good track record of seeing the writings on the wall for what's coming down the pipeline. But we are just, let's be honest here, I would say in a little bit more of a superficial society where actually presenting better, more well kept, looking healthier, looking more reliable, because it's obvious you take care of yourself when you have more muscle and your skin's clear. There is some data that because of that, individuals who come across that way do make more money. We didn't have to deal with that back in the day, right? Everyone kind of like had their role, hunter gatherer, all these things. So things are just different now. It's just the way that we look just has impacts in everything else, and primarily with actually our income, right? If you're a health coach, do you think you're more likely to attract clients if you are over heavy, your skin is all red and inflamed, your hair is falling out, you barely have any hair, you are talking like you're super twitchy and you're not speaking coherently, you have brain fog? No, because you're not doing the work. You're going to get more clients when you are the example. And I spoke to about 60 physicians the other night in Vancouver, highlighting this, that our patients are coming to us because we have knowledge that they want. And they look at us because we are the example. So that's why, looking attractive, looking and feeling your best, it's good. It's good for business.
I do not know what's up with my mute button, but thank God we're just about done. That was a good note to end on. I like how real you are with this stuff because I'm a Christian, but I'm a
Me too.
Christian that likes to be
Yeah.
logical, and I study evolutionary psychology outside of this. That's why I was mentioning it, because sometimes people think that those one counteracts the other. I don't necessarily believe that. It's not even the point. The point is, if you look at the data on this, what you just said is, it's so true that it's almost uncomfortable if you
It
really
is,
get
yeah.
into it. So you can hate the game or you can play it, folks. And that's how we'll end this one. Rachel, I have the signature question to end with today. This is just about general health. So it could be about skin, but it could be anything with health. And the signature question is this: if we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So that means you could get us to start doing one thing, or you can get us to stop doing one thing. What is the one thing that Rachel gets us to do?
Live your purpose.
Mic drop. Thank you so much for this interview today.
My pleasure.